Hello, my name is Maddie, and today we are going to be talking about the books I read in the month of May. So, I read about 7 books in the month of May, and I am really excited to talk about them because I read some good ones. So, the first book I read this month was called A Pale View of Hills by Kazuo Ishiguro. This book was about a woman named Etsuko who is living in England in the 1960s or 1970s. I'm not really sure if it actually specifies, but she's processing the suicide of her oldest daughter. So she is processing this while also visiting with her youngest daughter in England in the 1960s or 70s, and it flips between this scenario and her thinking back on her life in post-war Nagasaki with her previous husband, her previous in-laws, her friends back in Nagasaki, but it primarily focuses on the relationship she had with her neighbor Satsuko, who lived with her, or lived across from her for several months during the summer once, and her daughter, the relationship Satsuko has with her daughter. This book was haunting. Ishiguro, he seems to have an implicit trust with his readers, and I've only read Clara and the Sun before this, but this book did not hold your hand. The whole book feels haunting in a way where you feel like you're almost reading a ghost story, and you're not even entirely sure why. Yeah, so there is an unreliable narrator in this book and a massive plot twist that I do not like it when this particular plot twist is typically utilized in a book. However, the way he did it here was so masterful and so impactful. So the whole book feels almost apathetic in the way that she's telling her story. And as this plot twist happens, it's so subtle that you could miss it, but it's suddenly so emotional that it just makes that plot twist so impactful, and it makes the book so much better, to the point that you're not going to actually have a lot of answers by the end of this book. Yes, you realize that things may not have been the way you originally thought they were, but you don't really get answers to anything, and I don't think you needed answers to anything. I think that this book, though I don't think Ishiguro intended for it to be solely a historical novel that was 100% accurate, I do think that through his character work, you really were able to feel what it was like to live in Nagasaki during this time, in a time of cultural upheaval. And it really opens your eyes to what a woman in particular was going through, because you see that through Etsuko and Satsuko. And the characters are very, very flawed. You're not necessarily meant to like them, and I really like that he's able to really give you these multidimensional characters while making them unreliable and also not sympathetic, but you feel like you know them. And I just think Ishiguro is an excellent author. I've only read this, and I read Clara and the Sun. Clara and the Sun was an instant favorite of mine. And this one, I gave it 4 stars, but it's not because it was bad by any means. It was really because in my head, I think I was comparing it to Clara and the Sun. However, this one was really, really excellent. So, definitely recommend. This one was a 4-star. The next book I read was called The Last Letter by Rebecca Yarros. This is about a woman named Ella who recently lost her brother. He was a soldier, and he sent his best friend Beckett through his last letter to go and take care of his sister and her family while her daughter is undergoing cancer treatment. From there, they have a friendship, they have a mutual understanding, they have a blossoming romance. It deals with themes of just like grief and love and trust and found family and what it means to just take care of one another. I thought this book was absolutely brilliant. So I am not I'm not a reader or enjoyer of romance typically, which is not going to look that way from this list because I read 2 romances and really, really enjoyed them. And I read Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, and it was not my book. I will tell you that. I did not like it. I'm not a huge fan of smut or melodrama, but this book, I felt so deeply attached to the characters. I just loved the themes of grief and found family and parenthood. I'm not even a parent, but when it started talking about parenthood, I was just in tears. What else does it talk about? It talks about just trust and learning to rely on somebody else and what you will do for the people that you love, and you will fight to keep them alive. And then it talks about fate at the end, and like it has a religious lens with which you can view some stuff they talk about at the end, but I don't think that it's so overt that you actually have to read it through that lens. Really, this book, it was just a masterpiece for me. I was so surprised that I loved it as much as I did, and I can't stop recommending it to people. I will say this book is just riddled with tragedy. The end is tragic. The end is bittersweet, but there is so much tragedy. So if you are not in the headspace to deal with all of that, I would definitely steer clear from it until you're in a headspace where you could process all of that alongside the characters, because I really feel like you are walking in their shoes and you need to learn to process that with these characters. And I just thought it was masterful. I have gone on a bit of a Rebecca Yarros binge since this book, and aside from Fourth Wing, her books are really doing it for me. And you'll see, I'm going to talk about another one later. So yes, 5 stars. All right, the next book I read this month was My Friends by Fredrik Backman. And this one is about a girl named Louisa who has been obsessed with a painting her entire life. She's lived in foster care. She kind of sneaks out of her foster home to sneak into an art showing just so she can look at this painting. She wants to see it in person in her own eyes. She's only seen it on a postcard her entire life. Through some just hilarious mishaps, she ends up meeting 2 of the boys who were in the painting, actually painted within the painting. And so she kind of befriends them. She goes to their hometown and she learns about them. And like through this, you actually find her talking to Ted, one of the boys in the photo, as they make their way to his hometown. And you learn about her past, about the death of her best friend in her foster home. You learn about his past with his 4 friends from the painting that she's loved so much. It is very typical Backman in a lot of ways, and like it's coming of age. You have very likable, nuanced characters. And really, it will pull on your heartstrings. This was an instant 5 stars for me. Fredrik Backman is my favorite author. I could make an entire video on Fredrik Backman's books and how they've impacted me. I think that he has this incredible way of just like making you step back and like see a person for who they fully are. He will start by putting these people in a box and then gradually just kind of stripping their layers away so they feel like tangible people. And I love that about all of his characters. I love the themes in this book. I love everything that he's trying to say. He talks again about grief. He talks about basically society putting people in boxes and labeling them, and them having to break through that label. And you realize that people have been trying to underestimate these people their entire lives. It deals with themes of bullying, how we can talk to kids and encourage them and not just like tear them down. It talks about how easily you can tear someone down with just a couple of words. Oh, and it talks about like abusive families in a lot of ways, and then it really realistically, in my opinion, depicts what happens when your abuser can no longer abuse you, and if they get sick, and like how that actually affects you, and how that actually looks, because I feel like a lot of books do not depict that accurately, and I feel like I can't say more without spoiling you on what happens with this book, but I would just definitely recommend you read it. I will say, Fredrik Backman, he I can see some people having some of a hang up with his writing style. I definitely think that he is a writer who writes to make sense of what's going on in his head, and that's incredibly apparent to me after reading his nonfiction book. And there'll just be parts of this book where you can tell he's like working out something in his own head through his writing, and I can see that being a hang up for some people. I don't really mind it because I think similarly, but I would just warn you, he is a little flowery in his writing. Might not be for some people, but it's definitely for me. It was 5 stars. All right, and the next book I read was Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. I don't feel like I can say a lot without actually spoiling because we're so far within this series, but it's if you don't know already, it's Haymitch's Hunger Games. I really loved this. I think Haymitch was always a really astounding character, even from the original books. I think that Suzanne Collins did such a good job of making me feel for these characters, even though I knew most of them were going to die. Yeah, so you know what happens, but she really makes you feel things anyway. And I really liked how she made this book particularly, feel different. Like, yes, we were doing the reaping again, but the reaping itself was a lot different in what actually occurred, and I think it highlighted a lot of just how disgusting these games are. And I think that Suzanne Collins has always been an excellent writer for children, or young adults. I think that her writing style did not necessarily change much from the original trilogy or the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes for this book. And so I can look at this from the lens of like, I read these when I was 12. I loved them. I read this one when I was an adult, and I think I still got a lot out of it. And I really think that Suzanne Collins has always been able to take very difficult topics and make them approachable for young adults, but she definitely does not undermine their intelligence. She does not hold their hand through them. And I think because I have worked with a lot of kids who have been finding the Hunger Games and just devouring them in the way that I did when I was 12, 13, 14, and I think that that's what they like. I think that they want something that will challenge them, and I really appreciate Suzanne Collins for being able to do that. Where I think that, again, I'm 25 and reading the next Hunger Games installment, and my enjoyment doesn't necessarily wane. And I think that that's because she's able to just explore those themes so well, to the point that I don't really think that there's an age gap, aside from the fact that you should probably be like 11 or 12 when you read them and not any younger than that. I don't feel like I'm as over the moon about this book as everybody else is. I really enjoyed it. However, I think that my taste has changed a little bit, and that this is a really fast-paced book, and I tend to like more slow, meandery books at this point in my life. And it's really only that's the only reason it's 4 stars instead of 5 stars, but I did, again, really enjoy it. If you have not picked it up yet, I highly recommend it. All right, so the next book I read this month was called Alter One, and this is a set of side stories in the 86 light novel series by Asato Asato. And I mean, I can't really say a lot about this one without giving the rest of the series away, but I will gush on the rest of the series. It takes place in a far futuristic world where essentially humanity is battling with these robots called the Legion. It starts off in a place called the Republic of San Mongolia, where Lena, she is a handler of the Republic's self-operating mechs, which you realize they're actually piloted by humans who are called the 86, and they are anybody that isn't necessarily the main race within the Republic. Because they have been deemed inhuman, they are really just processors for their mechs that they're essentially using to fight this war. Essentially, the 86, they have been deemed unworthy of living, unworthy of citizenship, and they are sent to die. While Lena, who is a handler, looks at this and is like, this is wrong, and essentially then tries to fight back against this system, but she can't, because she's only one person in a very terrible situation. This series has been everything for me. I watched the anime first, and then the anime covers, I think, the first 3 volumes of the light novel series, and so I went back, read the first 3 volumes, and the rest of the 13 books in less than 2 months. Honestly, it was so good. I think the characters are phenomenal. I think that it's not something that necessarily shatters my worldview, but it makes me look at situations, because I care so much about these 86 and Lena, these processors that have been deemed inhuman. It does honestly make me take a step back and look at things people say in our modern world, and I'm like, but what are you really advocating for? And it is obvious within this world that this didn't just like happen overnight. It didn't happen because somebody just decided this. It didn't just happen overnight and people were like, oh, that sounds great. It happened over a long time, and it took really extreme circumstances for this to happen. So you really do look at the nuance. You look at the people that didn't know that they were doing anything wrong. You look at, it's so good. You have to read it. I don't feel like I'm explaining it very well because it's such a complex series. But maybe I'll make a video just like trying to get you to read this. Either way, Alter One was a collection of side stories within this world. I waited a little bit to read it because the last installment in the series was so dark and excellent that I could not possibly go back to when it was a little lighter and enjoy it. But I took some time, read it. I don't have a lot to say about it, and I'm giving it 5 stars. Yes, because of the rest of the series, and it was pretty hard for me not to give an 86 book 5 stars. The next book I read this month was In the Likely Event by Rebecca Yarros. Again, another Rebecca Yarros book that I absolutely adored. It is about Izzy and Nate who meet each other on a plane. The plane crashes. They get through that journey together, and like throughout their lives after that, they just kind of keep running into each other. They fall head over heels for each other. They try to work their lives around each other, but it ends up being incredibly difficult, mostly because Izzy is under the thumb of her abusive family. abusive parents. They're hyper controlling and they don't care about her. Where Nate is actually stationed in Afghanistan in the special forces within the military, to escape his abusive family as well. And so it goes and it deals with the two of them being unable to really meld their lives together, until they are in Afghanistan. Izzy comes working for a senator to Afghanistan in an attempt to get her sister, who she loves more than anyone else in the world, who's working as a journalist there, to come home because the country is crumbling, everything is falling to the Taliban, and she just doesn't want her sister to die. Nate is there, and he ends up being her bodyguard, helping her find her sister. You do find, as they're there, that something had gone incredibly wrong in their past, and so you have it flips between Nate and Izzy trying to get her sister Serena out of Afghanistan, and just their entire life up to this point where you find out what went wrong. This was also just an excellent book. I love the themes again. Same with The Last Letter. It dealt with a lot of trauma. It dealt with familial abuse, different kinds of familial abuse. And I felt more so in this book, like, it really put me in the shoes of what a military couple might be going through. I do know that Rebecca Yarros, her husband, was in the military, or still is. I'm not entirely sure. And I think that I noticed this in The Last Letter and this book. All of the themes that she explores and the struggles her characters go through, I can tell they are very close to home. And though I haven't experienced something like this, I feel like her books offer a little bit of a window into what that would actually be like. And the characters themselves are just excellent. Again, a surprise for me from Fourth Wing, where I did not like the characters, but again, in The Last Letter and in The Likely Event, I thought the characters were so relatable, and I was so attached to them, and that really, really makes a book for me, just in general. I gave this one 4 stars, just because I thought some parts dragged, but it wasn't really that big of a deal. And also, I was probably just comparing it to The Last Letter, which was just brilliant for me in every way. This book does have a twist that I did not see coming, and this one I don't think is as sad as The Last Letter, but it has parts that are sad. So if you are not ready for some heaviness in your life, I would just give it a minute before you read this. And lastly, I read At Night I Become a Monster by Yoru Sumino. This one is about a high school boy. He turns into a monster in the middle of the night. He goes to school because he forgot his homework. And when he's there, he sees a girl who was often bullied within his high school class. He doesn't really want to talk to her, but from there, he does keep on meeting her at night while he becomes a monster. And then it flips between their meetings at night and what happens during the day when they're at school. And the entire class is just harassing her. And this book, I have such mixed feelings on it because I love what it was saying. I love the way it portrayed the bullying. I love the way it talked about how it's almost worse to sit and watch someone get bullied and say nothing than to outright bully somebody. It goes into why this happened and how it almost like creates a sense of unity within the rest of the class to hate one person, and how that creates a chain reaction within the student body so that like nobody really steps up and defends this person. And even the teachers don't really even notice, because it seems like everybody's getting along and they are so subtle about it that they don't notice. Like, they write in her notebooks, they don't do anything so overt, and how that is also, that's almost worse than somebody just going out and saying something terrible to somebody's face. I have such mixed feelings about this book, because I believe Yoro Sumino wrote I Want to Eat Your Pancreas, which is an anime movie I watched. I never actually read the light novel, but like, I did not like that one. And I can't even really tell you why. I love what he's exploring. I love the themes he is actually trying to, not even the themes, the discussions he's trying to have within both these stories. But there is something about the writing that I don't necessarily connect with in I Want to Eat Your Pancreas. And I do think this one I liked a lot better than I Want to Eat Your Pancreas. And so I gave it like 3 stars, but it's really a 3.5 stars. Because I do think that Yoro Sumino is a very, very competent author. There's just something about his stories that where I don't connect. And I want to read some others. I was looking at descriptions of some of his other light novels, and I think I'm going to try a couple. We'll see if I like them. Because I like the idea of his books in a lot of ways, but I maybe don't like them in practice. And I think that was there to a lesser extent with this book. Yeah, those are all of the books I read in the month of May. I find that I am very long-winded, so I don't even know how long this video is going to be. Maybe I will learn to become more concise in the future. But yeah, I really, really loved a lot of the books I read this month. A lot of 4 and 5-star reads, except for my one kind of quasi-dud at the end of the month. But yeah, please tell me what you read in the comments. I would really love to chat about that with you. Yeah, thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.